Hello. I want to say a few words about the situation involving the comedian Joe Brand. If you're not familiar with this, basically, she said that politicians should have battery acid thrown in their face. She's backtracked, of course, and made a half-hearted apology, not much of an apology. Come to that in a minute. But the specific context of this was the issue came up apparently on the show that she was on, which was pre-recorded back in May, and it was a show I understand called Hearsay or Hearsay, or I don't Heresy, I think actually is the name of the show on Radio Four. And the issue of right-wing politicians having milkshakes thrown at them was brought up, which was an issue during the European election. Nigel Farage, Carl Benjamin, and others had milkshakes thrown on them. Um, and she said these people were pathetic. Why use milkshakes when you can use battery acid? Um, hmm, well, since 2011, 1,500 people roughly have been victims of acid attacks in London alone. That's just in the capital. So I don't know what the figure is for the rest of the country, but this is a evil crime. I mean, it causes lifelong scarring. I understand that it causes prolonged pain, not just the initial pain, but that pain lasts for a long time. It really is an evil crime. So for her to make a joke about that, she's backtracked. She's claimed that it was a fantasy and she would never do it. And she was sorry if anyone was offended, but she didn't think it was wrong what she said because it was just a fantasy. What needs to happen? Apparently, there has been a police investigation because of complaints that this was an incitement to violence. What needs to happen is Radio Four need to do the right thing and definitely kick her off their show, not let her appear there again. She does need to be polarized at least for a while. You know, she needs to feel the heat, not just the criticism. She needs to feel heat. Where it hurts as a celebrity, as a public figure, she needs to keep a low profile because where these people hurt is in their pocket. So, she should miss out on TV appearances or radio appearances, and, she should be a pariah for a while. There shouldn't be any sort of vigilantism, but, I understand people being angry about her coming out with this, and I understand people being angry about the perceived double standards. On LBC, Nigel Farage brought up this issue yesterday. I was going to call in, but it was a daytime slot. It was busy. My only issue with Farage is he was saying that this should be, she should be arrested for incitement to violence. I sort of agree with that because even if it was a joke, I mean, if you're a public figure and you're calling for that sort of crime, whether it's in a joking sense or not, that has implications. I really believe that. Um, my issue with Farage, though, is he was saying that it's only Remainers and the left coming out with this sort of stuff. The truth of the matter is, there are extremes on both sides. I've personally been threatened by Leave extremists on this channel. And there was that UKIP councillor who called for Remain voters, not just politicians, but voters, to be attacked with machetes. Now, if Farage cannot condemn that, then it's a bit rich to complain about Remain extremists. So what I wanted to do was call in and agree with him, but remind him that there's extremes on both sides. So Farage, by saying it's only the Remain side, that's just disingenuous. I would agree, though, that there's double standards in how the left see these things. I saw people coming out with excuses like, "Oh, that's just what she does." I don't really know what her sense of humor is. I know who she is. I'm not that familiar with her sense of humor. I understand it's a bit dry. It's a bit deadpan. I don't know. But if this is her line of humor, it says a lot, really. Um, I can appreciate dark, edgy humor to an extent, But there are certain things, if you're a decent human being, you just don't say. And if you're a public figure, there should be consequences if you say things like that. I mean, she really needs to meet survivors of this and then say, oh, it's just a fantasy, I didn't really mean it. I really believe that. I really believe if she has any sincerity, she would have the humility to meet survivors and apologize to them. Because to trivialize that sort of crime, in political discourse, people get strong views. They get angry. I get angry about things. But if I were a public figure and I were to promote violence against people I didn't like, say, for example, I mean, I have utter contempt for Jeremy Kyle, for Frankie Boyle, who I think is a slimeball, and for certain other public figures. But if I was to call for violence against them and then violence did occur, I'd be responsible for that and I couldn't complain because I would have advocated that violence. I think that it's okay to express anger, even dislike or even hatred of someone. I'm not saying that should be the way, but it's realistic. It's not realistic to just assume that we all settle differences by sitting down with a nice cup of tea. People do have strong views when it comes to political discourse. So I think it's a little bit unrealistic to say, oh, let's all hold hands and, that's just not realistic. But what we can be realistic about is responsibility in terms of specifically violence, but particularly that sort of violence. I mean, it's one thing saying you want to punch someone. Okay, people shouldn't do that, but that's clearly in a different category than saying throwing acid in someone's face. I mean, that really is something. But then again, society can be pretty hypocritical. It's right that there's calls for Brand to be sacked, and I think Radio 4 would be pretty cowardly if they don't act on that, given that Danny Baker was fired from the BBC for his racist tweet a while back. And I do believe that was problematic. I don't think there should have been a full blown police investigation because there was no actual explicit violence in what he was promoting. It was, I think, a bad taste and very badly judged. But in this case, it would be a perception that it's fine if a lefty does it, but if a right wing person does it, then that's a different matter. That cannot be right. There cannot be left right double standards on either side. So it's down to right wing politicians, public figures, to call out right wing extremists, and it's down to left wing public figures to call out left wing extremists. I understand that James O'Brien on LBC was making an issue of the fact that someone couldn't name the radio show that she was on, but that's hardly the point. So what if someone couldn't name the precise show? That is an example of leftist detraction, pretty typical of James O'Brien, actually. Um, I um, I think there is something fundamentally wrong with people who would say that that is just a bit of humor. I honestly would say that. And when a degenerate slimeball like Frankie Boyle comes out with things like joking about breast cancer and so on, and people say, "Oh, he's a great guy," and he's got legions of fans, it troubles me. It troubles me that society, people are so willing to defend obnoxious people or to admire even obnoxious people. Like there's this admiration for the most cynical, nasty aspects of human nature. Why is that? I find that deeply, deeply depressing. And unfortunately, it is an aspect of modern Britain. Now, I don't want to be too negative. There's a lot of good out there, but it really troubles me that bullying is admired. Why is Gordon Ramsay admired? Not because he's a great chef, and he is a very skilled chef. It's because people like to see him yell in people's faces. Is Frankie Boyle popular? Because he tells sick jokes. It's it's a cynical admiration for bullying, callousness, I find it deeply troubling, and I think public figures have responsibility. I'm not talking about political correctness, right? I'm not talking about us sanitizing things to the point where they're squeaky clean. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying there needs to be some sense of decency